Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.wordpress.com.
And this is Travis from Oddfellows Thoughts at oddfellowsthoughts.wordpress.com.
Well, we're back. Hi, Travis. How you doing?
Hey, not too bad.
Good. So we have today, we're going to do a couple different things. We're going to talk about some news that's, I think, bothering us, might be the proper way to phrase that, Travis.
Maybe.
Maybe complain, maybe just discuss. How about that? We'll go
just
discuss.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about a few of the new Vertigo titles that we've read. DCB Service ran an excellent deal on these first few issues of these these new number ones, and because of that, we decided to try them out. All of them. I mean, I was going to get some of these anyway, based on who's involved with them, but because they had that wonderful deal, we got all four. So we're going to talk about those a little bit later. But first, a couple of administrative things. Just wanted to mention that the Long Box Review podcast is a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. And I mention them not only because it's a great community for podcasters, and you can discover a whole bunch of comic book related podcasts. I swear there's a million of them. I don't know how many there are, but there's a lot of them out there. But Longbox Review is part of that now. But I mention that because I think a large part of us becoming a part of the Comics Podcast Network, Travis, the Longbox Review podcast had over 1,000 downloads in the month of March.
Nice.
Which is, to me, just absolutely amazing. So yeah. I want to thank the network for allowing us to be part of that, and also all the people who have downloaded the show. And that also includes a lot of international people lately. We have there's a few people over in Great Britain that seem to consistently download the podcast, but there's a few people in China. There's a Spain. Where else? I can't remember now, but there's a lot of them out there, and I really appreciate it. We have some in Canada now, and of course all of the people I absolutely love in the United States, and there's a lot of them out there. Thank you very much for listening and tuning in and continuing to download. So,
no doubt.
Yeah. Which reminds me, please, those who are listening, it would be great if you give us some reviews on iTunes and other podcast directories. That would be great. We also had, Travis, one of our first iTunes reviews, which that was exciting. A lot of people and I'm guilty of this too. I don't know about you, but I use iTunes to subscribe and download my podcasts. There's a bunch of other tools you can use. I just use iTunes. It's convenient. But in using iTunes, you can go on and offer your reviews of the podcast. Well, I don't always do that. So I've been really trying hard to go back in all the podcasts that I listen to. And I listen to quite a few comic book related podcasts and some others that aren't comic book related. But I've been trying to go back there into iTunes and rate those for them, because they're in the same boat that the Longbox Review podcast is in, right? Because there's like 1 billion comic book podcasts now.
Sure. And
one way to get your podcast noticed is that I'm so excited I can't talk. A lot of positive reviews. You get your podcast noticed more in the iTunes. So anybody who reviews Longbox Review in my book is really, really cool. And the one person who did this is, and I'm not really sure how to pronounce this iTunes username. But I'm gonna pronounce it this way: Fuku Dometown, Fuku Dometown. Called our podcast amazing, gave us 5 stars. Thank you very much. And says, keep up the great work. Wish comic book was in your title so it would pull up in the iTunes search easier for others to find this amazing podcast. Amazing podcast, isn't that great?
Jeez.
So I took Mr. or Ms. Fuku Dometown's advice. I did not, I can't add, like Longbox Review comic book podcast. I can't change the name of it now. Sure. once you're registered. But I did go back in and add comic book, that phrase, into the podcast description. So
Oh.
That I can change. So I thought, you know what, that's a very good observation. So I've changed that a few places that I have Longbox Review registered, or online wherever. So hopefully that helps people find us. And I've noticed, Travis, when you go into iTunes and you just put in comic book and do a search under podcast for that, now Longbox Review shows up on page 3 as you hit the next page button.
Heck, we probably owe this person something.
I think we do. Besides our very sincere thanks. Yeah, I think you're right. Anyway, so before that, when I didn't have comic book in the description, I don't know that we were actually showing up in that search. So yeah, I think we do owe this person something.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And maybe they would like to come onto the show. How about that?
There you go.
That'd be good. Anyway, so people can, Mr. or Ms., as I said, Fuku Domtown, you can always contact me at longboxreview@gmail.com for that kind of, we'll get something set up, I guess. I don't know, maybe. All right, let's see. Is that it? Yes, that is it as far as administrative stuff. So let's get on to the topics, Travis. And first up is that bit of news that we wanted to talk about that may have riled us up a little bit. So I read this on Bleeding Cool initially, but then I found on the Comics Alliance website that there's a nice little compilation of this stuff. So Chris Roberson, who I think is mostly known more recently for his work on iZombie, went on Twitter and basically said he was quitting DC Comics and elucidated as to why he was quitting, which I found really interesting because we went to Emerald City Comic Con last month, and this is April. Yes, well, sort of last month. Anyway, a few weeks ago we went to Emerald City Comic Con, and I remember when we were in the Vertigo panel, they announced that the iZombie title would be ending soon.
Right.
That, okay, well, there's a comic ending, but no big deal. I mean, maybe to the fans it's a big deal, but I didn't really think about it in terms of, maybe there's something going on. I just thought, well, here's another title that's ending, and maybe it's ending because the creators want it to end, or maybe low sales, or whatever. Anyway, so then flash forward 3 weeks ish. Chris Roberson, as I said, goes out there and says this, and I'm reading this from coverage from Comics Alliance here, and I'm just going to read the thing real quick. This is by Chris Roberson again. My decision not to pursue or accept any further work from DC was not a sudden one, but was something that I've struggled with for quite some time. And it wasn't due to my own personal experiences with the company, which that's initially when I heard this, that's what I was thinking. So that's good. It wasn't due to his personal experience with the company, and I still have nothing but good things to say about the editorial staff at Vertigo. Again, that's good. But stemmed instead from the way other creators and their heirs have been and are being treated. While I was aware of some of the problems that other creators and their heirs have had with the company when I started doing work for them, many of those instances were things that had happened some time ago, and I was able to convince myself that things were different now. But in the course of the last few months, things like the countersuit against the Siegel estate and the announcement of Watchmen prequels over Alan Moore's objection made it clear to me that the treatment of creators and their heirs was still very much a concern, and that I couldn't reconcile my own principles with the actions of the publisher. And then I read an article also on Comics Alliance, and I read these, I think, a week or two apart. I think I read this article. It's an opinion piece by David Brothers called "The Ethical Rot Behind Before Watchmen and the Avengers," and I won't read that. That's way too long. But basically, it talks about how this opinion piece writer, Mr. Brothers, has basically quit DC and Marvel, buying DC and Marvel comics because of things like Before Watchmen and the lack of attribution, I'll say, to Jack Kirby and his estate over the Avengers. And Travis, I don't know if you heard about this. Again, Emerald City Comic Con, there was a panel about crime comics.
Yeah, I was sitting on another panel at the time. I really wanted to go to that. I'm trying to remember what panel I went to instead.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was doing at that time. I was going to look that up, but I missed that too. But John Suntress from the Word Balloon podcast was able to record it, and he's released it, so you can go listen to that. And I have to say, I have not actually listened to the entire thing, but I did listen to a big chunk of it a few days ago. And this has Greg Rucka and Ed Brubaker on it. And so you got this thing with Chris Roberson, that article that I just met, or that opinion piece that I just mentioned by Mr. Brothers. And then I was listening to this podcast, or a podcast of that panel, and they say Mr. Rucka and Mr. Brubaker say some things that, lead you to believe, and that's being generous, about how bad things were for them at DC Comics. And so all this kind of, I guess I'm going to umbrella this with negative, I guess, these negative looks or negative feedback about DC Comics. But let's start with what Mr. Roberson said. What are your thoughts on that, Travis?
Well, obviously, his choice, his life, and what he wants to do with his career. And so I don't know that I have a lot to say about specifically what his decision. That's fine. That's his decision.
Sure.
I guess the whole thing riles me up in the sense that, yeah, there were some people who have been treated incredibly poorly in the past, without a doubt. I mean, not just with DC, but obviously Marvel too. And I think just about any other contract that's ever been signed by any corporation, anywhere in the United States, crappy stuff goes on. I have a hard I guess for me, him saying that somehow the Before Watchmen is like the final tipping point, and reading some of the interviews that they've had with him since then, like on CBR, where he talks further about how poorly Mr. Moore was treated on the whole thing and whatnot. I don't know. He had to have known most of that going into when he first started working for DC. And then, so as long as he was making money, it was all well and fine, and the sales on his book were sliding enough that they decided to cancel the book. And he says that's why the book got canceled, is because of sales, not because of anything he was saying. That's why iZombie got canceled, is due to sales. And then after, of course, pretty much his work is relatively done, other than the upcoming Fairest arc that he was going to write.
Oh, that's right.
Then he chooses to badmouth DC proper. I don't know. That bothers me in one sense, because everybody that quote unquote is getting screwed as a general rule, and I say as a general because obviously I don't know all the litigation that's out there for all this different stuff that's going on, but the people who are generally quote unquote getting screwed, they sign contracts that they could have had lawyers, they could have hired to read over those things and say, these are all the pitfalls that could happen with this. I mean, everybody has the ability to do that. And yeah, some of those contracts suck, but it's the way business was done at the time. Business needs to improve for sure, but it is a business. At the end of the day, it's a business. If the business can't generate and continue to generate money, it doesn't operate. And if it doesn't operate, obviously we don't get any of this stuff. And comic books are especially a weird thing because since time memoriam, they keep writing about the same stuff that somebody created way back in the day. The company hired them to create these characters for them. Not, you've got some characters, why don't you bring them along and you can write about them in our universe for a while and then take them away someplace. That's never how it's been. And so for people to suddenly be upset over that, I think is crazy. Now, should they be compensated? Yeah, I think everybody should be compensated for, what they create and whatnot. But I don't know. To me, it felt, whereas I can appreciate him supposedly standing up for his morals and what he thinks is right and wrong. I appreciate that. But at the same time, I also appreciate I don't know, company loyalty is what I want to word, isn't necessarily what I use. But when you decide you're going to leave a place, not to leave it and publicly dump a whole bunch of crap as you're going. To me, whether you want to work for them or not ever again or not, doesn't really matter. If they've treated you well the entire time, and then you free it, I don't know. To me, that seems in bad taste too. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, now, okay, so you touched on about the contract thing. I'm going to come back to that because he also talks about that as well, or maybe it's in the opinion piece by Mr. Brothers. I can't remember now, but so it seems like that in general DC treated him well enough personally. Like you said, he had no issues with Vertigo and DC Comics in general about his work. Mm-hmm. Although now that I'm perusing one of the articles on CBR, an interview with him, perhaps that wasn't quite the.
Well, no, in that article he talks about how that contract is set up, as to what he can or can't use and what does he get or not get. That in a way, the contract is written. DC can kind of keep control of the thing for TV rights and that sort of thing because they're an entertainment house. Obviously, if they want to potentially do their own TV or movie rights, they can stop anybody else from trying to buy those rights.
Right.
That's the contract he signed in a modern day age where he states that he grew up with this whole boom of the creator-owned thing with Image and all that sort of stuff. So he went into this knowing that kind of stuff happens. He could have hired himself a lawyer, and maybe he did, that went over that contract and said, these are some of the pitfalls that are that, and he chose to sign that contract anyway.
But that doesn't make the contract necessarily right. It's just that
if it wasn't right, why the hell did you sign it?
Okay,
you sign a contract if you don't think the contract is right? You make a choice. Okay, I want to produce this work, and this is where I want to produce this work at. These are the choices that I make to produce that work there.
But that still doesn't make what the company is doing the right thing to do. And by him publicly coming out with this and making this statement, I don't know. I don't know. Is he just complaining or and showing a little bit, inside baseball type stuff, or
yes.
Is he really trying to affect some sort of change? Is he trying to lead some sort of charge? And maybe get more people behind him, or is he just grousing about it? I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that. But at the same time, like I said, yeah, you're right. You have a contract, you sign it, you live up to that contract, just like the company should be expected to live up to the contract.
Agreed.
But it still doesn't make the contract right.
So why do people keep signing them then? If these contracts are so bad and screw everybody over so bad, why don't all of these people go someplace else? There are tons of other places they can produce their comic books at. It's a known fact that everybody could go someplace else. And we're not having some massive watershed moment where every creator is leaving all of these companies because they're so treated so poorly and going to all creator-owned stuff. They obviously are actively making a decision to go with what that contract says and giving up certain things to produce the works they want to produce where they want them produced at.
Okay, yes, but at the same time, you could do that. You could go be with a smaller company or produce your own work, but that doesn't mean that you're going to reach that audience. You sign a contract with a big company to get your work out there and get it more well known. That's
one
reason, right?
How does the company afford to do that? Does the company afford to do that by not making money?
But I don't think we're really talking about money here with this particular situation. I mean,
we are for the company. The company's about making money.
Sure.
Money's involved. So money's involved. Money's part of it. It's the corporation's part of it. That's what's important to the corporation.
You don't think that okay, let me ask you this. Do you think that the bottom line is always profit? Yes, with any corporation. That's granted, okay? But at the same time, don't you think that DC and Marvel, the big companies, I mean, they want to produce quality material, entertainment material. And to do that, they also have, not only do they, they have to protect, we're getting into stuff that, I'm not a lawyer. I've not worked for these kind of corporate. I mean, I work for a corporation, but it's not like this.
Right. So do I. Yeah.
So, we're just two guys who are almost lifelong fans, and we're just kind of talking about this stuff as far as we know it. But, yes, the company has to make money. The creators need to make money. But at the same time, the company has to treat the creators a certain way to make them happy and productive, and not basically do what Roberson did.
Sure. Totally agree.
Okay, so so you agree the company has a responsibility to do what I'm going to call, quote unquote, the right thing, whatever that happens to be.
Okay, yeah, but there's a large,
I know that's
a large area in there of what is the right thing.
Yes, I agree. So let's talk about that in particular. So the right thing in relation to what Roberson said, the right thing as far as Alan Moore and Brian Bolland. Wait, Bolland, is that right?
No.
I always do this.
Gibson. Right?
I don't know why I say Bolland all the time.
I don't know. We're not going to go through another podcast like that again. No.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so apparently there was the contract that they have with them.
Have you actually read this contract? Or are you just going with what everybody's
I'm going with what I've heard about it. Have you read the contract?
No, I have not read the contract.
Okay. So, based on what I've heard about this contract with Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, DC, the rights to Watchmen would revert back to those creators once Watchmen was no longer being published. Whatever that means. I assume that means the trade versions of it.
Right.
Because there was no other related material. There weren't sequels, there weren't prequels until now, and it was just whatever, as long as that trade paperback or however many editions they kept churning out, as long as they were being published, the rights retained or were retained by DC.
Sure.
Then we had the movie. They sold a bajillion Watchmen trades. It's considered.
They were selling lots of Watchmen trades before the movie.
They were, but I mean, when the movie came out, they sold a bunch more, right?
Sure.
It's this tale, this 12-issue series, back in 86, 87.
Yep.
It's considered one of probably, if not the pinnacle, one of the pinnacles of the comic book world, right? So it's one of the best known within our own circle, the comic book fans. It's probably well known to a certain degree with people outside of that, due largely, I would think, because of the movie.
Sure.
I mean, hell, I took a class, a literature class, and that's one of the books that we read in the class.
Yeah.
This is 10 years ago.
Right.
Or so, So it's in the universities. It's the literati are have taken this on.
Right.
So what's my point with this? It's just well known, right? So you have this thing that is constantly in print because there's a demand for it. Now, no one can tell the future, But I'm sure DC was thinking, well, eventually, just like everything else they publish, it goes out of print.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't work out that way. So what's the right thing here? The thinking nowadays is that the right thing should be, well, DC should just hand over the rights to Moore and Gibbons because that would be the right thing to do. I don't know if that's the right thing to do.
That would be crazy.
Well, crazy from the publishing, I have to make a profit at the end of the day perspective, sure.
Well, yeah. It's a business. If the business wasn't there, that book would have never been produced.
So you don't think that Moore and Gibbons have any claim to these rights?
Well, they have rights to get paid.
Right, which they did.
Well, Moore doesn't want to get paid. Yeah, they have rights to that because that's what the contract states. Do they have the right to say, no, you can't use my work when the contract states they can use the work? No.
Yeah.
They don't have rights to that. And they knew that going in because before Watchmen was written, how many years worth of comics books were produced before that? And do any of those people have rights to those things out of the two big companies? Do anybody have the rights to those? No, nobody does. If you're lucky, when you open up the comic book and it says, the Demon, it gives rights to Kirby or whoever it was that created it, and Batman's created by Bob Kane, but you don't have the rights to them. They knew that. They knew that going in. So in an ideal world, and this is where I'm going to get myself in trouble. I know people are going to listen to this thing and go, man, that guy's an ass. In an ideal world, yes, everybody would retain possession of whatever they did. But just like any other company, if you create something for the company's going to own it. It's the company's. You're working for the company. If you don't want the company to own it, don't work for the company. Or get a better contract.
Oh, well, but okay, so how do you do that? How can these comic creators get better contracts?
Well, if they all think they're being screwed and they're not getting what they think they deserve out of it, don't work for them. Go work for somebody else. If there's no talent pool and nobody's willing to do that, then they're going to get better contracts. Because, right, for DC and for Marvel to make money, they have to create an entertaining product, we hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have anybody with any talent working there, you got to change something about your behavior to get the people working for you that you need working for you. That's how I see it. I sympathize with and don't get me wrong, I love my creators to death. I sympathize with them. It pisses me off when they are getting screwed or whatever. But it doesn't feel to me like you're being screwed. If you sign a contract and the company is following the contract you sign. Now, Schuster, the people who did Superman, Jack Kirby, those kind of people, those people were completely and utterly screwed.
Well, what's the difference?
They got screwed way back. What's the difference? Those people had completely different contracts.
But it's still a contract. They had the choice of signing that contract.
Well, actually,
or
no.
not.
Kirby didn't have a contract. Kirby's contract allowed him to retain the rights basically to everything in the original stuff he wrote. And then in 70, whatever it was, when they changed the copyright laws and whatnot, then basically Marvel sent out a bunch of goons to pressure him into basically signing everything over because he was at his end years and couldn't continue to fight it.
Right.
That's different.
Okay, but you still have that, in general. I mean, we talk about contracts, but in general, it's that whole concept of work for hire, right? And that's what the corporations usually throw out there, especially back in the early days of superhero comics. Schuster and the other early creators, they were the work for hire, and they didn't own anything. They got paid for whatever rates that were normal for the time, I guess. But they didn't own Superman, even though they came up with all this stuff, right? And the DC at that time, whatever they were called at that time, they owned it, and those guys worked for them, right?
Right.
So, I mean, we're basically still talking about the same thing. All of these creators are work for hire. And whatever they come up with, unless their contract specifically states they own that character or this title or this idea or whatever, it's owned by the corporation. So really, what's the difference between as you say, how much they got screwed back then as opposed to how much Moore and Gibbons are getting screwed now?
Because of the style of contracts that those guys signed back in the day, they didn't actually, like in the case of Kirby, for instance, he never, the contracts that he signed never actually gave up that to the company. And then in later years, the company basically pressured him into, because he couldn't continue to fight the litigation that was involved.
Right, and you have that infamous that paycheck thing where if he signed the paycheck to get paid, he basically was signing over any other additional rights. I agree.
That is the corporation being total asshats.
Yeah.
And shame on them for that. And that type of behavior is horrible. It's horrible. And I assume that there's nobody working for Marvel that was around during that time. And the corporation has moved on and hopefully grown up in some in ways. Okay. Both those corporations have.
Yes, I think they have to some degree. I'm glad you bring that up. Let's move more to that and get out of the whole contract space, because I feel like we're talking about something we really don't know anything about.
But for me personally, that's a lot of what it comes down to, though, is that contract. I mean, we could the moral, ethical, whatever, depending on how you want to judge that. Yeah, it would be really nice if creators could create stuff and they could take it with them, or even after they're not working for the corporation anymore, they could decide how those things get used and whatnot. And that maybe that would be great and all, but that certainly wouldn't be good for the business. It would be like whoever created Pepsi, for instance, choosing, well, Pepsi wants to change the can, and now they're going to put it in a red can instead of a blue can, and they don't like that, and they're going to tell them, no, you can't market this way. The corporation can't work that way. Not these types of conglomerate corporations. If you want that kind of thing, I don't know, go work for Dark Horse or for Image or for whoever else is out there. Mm-hmm. Granted, those things didn't exist for Alan Moore and whatnot as much, I don't believe. I don't know, because I never paid attention to the publishers really back in the mid to late 80s.
Okay, so granted, you're right. It does really come down to that contract, but let's get back to the idea of again what the right thing to do is, or the companies improved over time, and they certainly did. DC started giving back artists their pages. This is in the I think maybe mid to late 70s, so they started doing this. In the 80s and 90s, creator rights really came to the forefront, right. And DC at that time I think led the charge. Uh-huh. Marvel kind of followed suit. They smoothed over things with Kirby at that time, and his estate. Maybe not to everyone's satisfaction, but I don't think anybody completely gets what they want. But I want to bring this back to Moore and Gibbons and bring in something else real quick. So one of the things that Moore said, and this was, I guess, in the New York Times, quote, "I don't want money. I want this not to happen," he said. Speaking of the before Watchmen thing.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And he's entitled to his opinion. He can certainly say that story stood alone. It should stand alone. And it's done. They shouldn't do anything else. And that's certainly his opinion. That he can certainly say that.
Well, without doubt.
And to some degree, I happen to agree with them on that. I don't think DC needed to do this, but they chose to do it, and they have the right to do so because of whatever contract they have. They own the characters. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that I think there was some suggestion that DC was doing this before Watchmen stuff, not only to make more money, but also there was some people online, basically saying, well, they're doing this to screw over Moore and Gibbons because they're continuing the publication of this stuff.
That's absurd.
I agree with you. I think that's ridiculous.
That's absolutely absurd.
I think they're just coming back to it.
Spend money just to mess with a single person.
Well, and that wasn't that. I've read things like that too, where it's like, well, you know what? Moore's been a thorn in our side, so we're going to stick it to him even more by doing this. I don't think they're doing that.
But he hasn't been. All he does is create more money and continue to generate buzz, even when there's not a buzz. And they can get him on, some radio or TV show, and he'll rant and rave, and all it does is continue to create buzz.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it really hurts DC that bad.
Okay. So, he said this, I don't want this to happen, basically. Gibbons takes a more agreeable approach. He wished the artists and writers well on this thing. He did say that, kind of hedging his bets a little bit, I think, or maybe he's just, a lot nicer than Alan Moore, and that's probably true.
Yeah.
He says the original series of Watchmen is the complete story that Alan Moore and I wanted to tell. However, I appreciate DC's reasons for this initiative and wish, as I said, wish them well.
Sure.
May these new additions have the success they deserve. And boy, you could take that a couple of different ways. But he's being more agreeable, as I said. But it's okay. I'm going to throw this out too. There's two more things I want to bring in, and then we should move on. Again, talking about what's right, because one thing I can't remember if I heard this being talked about in a podcast or if I read it online now. It doesn't matter. But as I understand it, again, I don't have sources for this, but what I quote unquote heard is that when Paul Levitz was in charge of DC, he basically stopped this whole Before Watchmen idea. He would not allow it to go forward out of respect, I guess, for Moore and Gibbons.
Sure.
Of course, now fast forward a few years, Paul Levitz is no longer in charge of DC Comics, and suddenly DC is doing Before Watchmen. Now, couple that with this idea, Travis.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever something gets brought up about Sandman, and I've read this a few times over the years, they always, so far, have deferred to Neil Gaiman. They always, DC owns the Sandman stuff. Neil Gaiman doesn't own that.
Mm-hmm.
But I won't say that up until now. So far, because I know things have come up over the years, and there's actually been an appearance of Dream in JSA or Justice Society. I can't remember which title that was, but the new Dream that showed up at the end of Neil Gaiman's Sandman series shows up in this other thing. Well, they could do that. DC could do that if they want, or they could publish other comics related to Sandman, or even come out with a new version of Sandman, the Dreaming and all that stuff. They could do that right now because they own all that stuff, but they don't. So far, as I said, they've deferred it to Neil Gaiman. Whenever, like that appearance of the new Dream in the JSA title, they went to Neil and said, "Hey, we really like to do this," and he said, "Sure," but they deferred to him at that point. And so I'm not suggesting that there's this double dealing here, with Neil.
So okay, using that as an example. So Neil Gaiman, he's happy to have the stuff there and being used. But what if he had said no? You're telling me that you think that if he had said no, or I don't really care for that or whatever, that they might not have used it anyway? I think they cater to all of them. It sounds to me like anytime you hear any of these creators talk, if they're going to use some character that seems to be somebody's baby or whatever, almost always they contact that person and go, "Hey, I'm planning on using this. Is that okay?" or whatever. Alan Moore is cranky and doesn't want anybody to use any of his stuff for anything.
So you're saying that everybody, like you say, everybody's babies, they've gone to these people, and so far they've been agreeable, except for Moore.
I don't know that. I don't know that for a fact. All I'm saying is that it sounds to me like, from anything I ever hear from them, that they all do that. I don't know what happens when they say no. To tell you the truth, I don't know if they go ahead and do it anyway. And Moore is the person who's the loudest screamer about the fact they're doing what I don't particularly want them to do. Or sometimes the creators go, okay, the creator who's doing the work now goes, okay, that person said they really don't want him in there. I'll think of a different story, or I don't know. But I don't think it's fair to imply that somehow they're catering to Neil Gaiman and they're out just trying to give Moore the finger.
Well, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm saying is, it seems to me that I don't know. They seem to be doing the right thing. You know, again, we come back to that quote unquote right thing, right? They seem to be doing the right thing with Gaiman as far as Sandman goes, but for some reason they're not doing it with Moore. I'm not suggesting that DC's trying to stick it to Moore. I don't think they're doing that. You know, maybe to deal. Well, okay. I don't know. But.
So if they suddenly decide to put out a Sandman movie, and it's sold even remotely decently or whatever, and all of their back issues sold more than they're already selling like tons, because my understanding is the Sandman, obviously the titles just keep making more money because they keep putting out deluxe versions and stuff and whatnot, that they wouldn't go back and readdress those stories and whatnot, regardless of what Gaiman wanted to do.
I don't know.
It certainly can't pay Gaiman to write them because he's too expensive. I mean, he's pretty much said so.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well,
it'd be interesting if that situation does happen.
Corporation's responsibility is to make money. That's the corporation's responsibility to the people who hold stock in DC and Warner Brothers and whatnot. And that's their responsibility. Their responsibility is to follow their contracts, not break contracts or quote unquote screw people, but they have to make money. That's their job. That's their business. And so they go wherever the money seems to be. DC would not be producing all these before Watchmen stuff if they didn't think people were going to be excited about it and that the product wasn't going to sell.
Right.
So I without a doubt believe that if they cranked out a Sandman movie and it was even remotely popular and all the trades started selling even more like gangbusters, they would come back and they would tell more dream stories. We would have more stories with that. Neil Gaiman be damned if DC owns the rights to those.
You mean assuming he's objecting to it?
Right.
Yeah.
Which, quite frankly, I don't think he would.
Yeah. Well, so okay. So is this really? I mean, really, what we're talking about here? So we're talking about contracts and what's right or wrong between a corporation and a creator. But are we really just talking about Alan Moore's just cranky and other creators are not?
No, because there are people who are cranky along with him.
Like Chris Roberson.
And like I said, I don't object to. We're going back to the original thing. I don't object to Chris Roberson going, "Hey, I don't like this. I don't like this people treated, and I'm choosing to leave because of that." Good for him. There are lots of creators who will not work for the big companies because they want to own whatever they create. That makes sense, you know. And in this era, there are more and more places you can go with your own ideas and your own thing, and that's fine. But it frustrates me to point at these corporations and say, you're screwing these people when all they're doing is they're trying to figure out how to keep their company successful and they're not breaking a contract. If there was something in that contract that says they should not be doing this and they were doing it anyway, then I'd be right along with everybody else saying, look, these people are getting totally jacked on what's happening here. But I don't, no one's given evidence to show that that's any different than that. Because certainly Alan Moore would be sitting in the courts, you know, going to town on them if they were. It's just not what he wants. It's not what he wants. And I know, I'm sure Alan Moore isn't the only person. Alan Moore is just, because he's written the stuff he has a larger voice. And I respect Alan Moore for them not wanting to do that. You know, I don't plan on picking up any of the books. I guess if they sound really great at the end of the day, maybe I'll pick up a trade. But right now, I have no intentions of picking up the books because I don't need them. You know. So
your decision to not read them has nothing to do with all this stuff that we're talking about, though. It's just that you have no desire to read
I don't have an interest in it because that story was its own story. I don't need to know anything about these people beforehand that I already know. I don't see how there's a story to be told. But if they can figure out how to make one, awesome. I mean, if they figure out how to how to tell a story, and I suddenly start hearing that they're great and whatnot, cool, I'll be picking it up. You know, and some of the internet bothers me and whatnot because there's this implication that if you're working on these books, that somehow you're kind of scum of a creator because you're doing.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up. I was just going to say that too, because that's kind of what Roberson is implying. You know, he has a problem with this. You know, he said he couldn't reconcile his own principles with the actions of the publisher, and yet you have, you know, J. Michael Straczynski and Len Wein.
I don't particularly have a high opinion of him. But there's other people.
Right. But you have these other creators who are they've taken on the task of producing these prequels. So, you know, are they less principled than Mr. Roberson?
And some of those people are very pro creator. It's not like they're just out to make a buck. They're very pro creator. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I don't know.
So you don't think that Roberson's point or the implication that Roberson is making about principles and other people, as you said before, suggesting or outright, you know, saying that the people who are working on this before Watchmen stuff, you know, they're crap because they're doing it because they're contributing to DC Comics screwing Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons.
Yeah. But they're not screwing them. That's just it. They're just not going along with whatever their opinion is.
Yeah.
They're not screwing them. That's my issue. That's my issue on the what's right or what's wrong. Now, there's a whole different discussion on with those contracts. If the contracts they write with creators should be more creator friendly, sure, they probably could be. They probably could be. But I also know, and I'm not pro corporation. Let's make that very clear. I despise the idea of a corporation in a lot of ways. But the corporation has to function for that publisher house to produce the comics that we read. And quite frankly, I like reading those comics. I like reading all those characters and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And for all those characters to revert back to whoever originally did them, and if they have a bad day, they say, nope, you're not using that, would be unfortunate for a lot of my childhood and reading history and comics and whatnot. And so maybe that's selfish of me. I don't know, whatever. But
well, we are talking about things that are just, you know, they're big things, right? And like we said before, we're not lawyers and we're just guys talking about this stuff. But even now, I mean, even if we've talked for a while now about this, and we've thought about it, you know, when this stuff first happened, you know, at least a few weeks ago, and just you know the general buzz that we hear, you know, the industry buzz about how the corporations treat the creators and how the creators are with the corporation, all that's, you know, we just kind of absorb that over time, right? Mm-hmm. These are just I can't. In other words, I can't get my head wrapped around it all, unless I want to just be real simplistic and say, well, you know, X is bad and Y is good, that kind of a thing. But I don't see it as black and white.
It's not. Well, I guess it's not, but it is at the same time, because there is that contract at the end of the day. And yeah, I know there's plenty of people who have the argument on the internet, including the one piece on Comics Line, talk about that if you revert back to just saying it's the contract, that you're an asshat if you say that. But I'm going to continue to say that because they're not doing anything wrong. And I don't think they wrote the contract on the thought of, we're going to take this creator for all he's worth. I mean, do you think they wrote those contracts with those kind of intent?
Are you talking about the one with Moore and Gibbons, or just in general?
In general, or with those two guys?
No, I don't think it was DC trying to milk everything out of Moore and Gibbons in terms of Watchmen. It was, you know, it was probably a standard contract for them at that time.
Right.
But again, I come back to my point at the very beginning. You know, is that the right contract? Should that be the contract that they offer the creators? Probably not. They should probably give them a little bit more, I guess. But you know, that's the nature of the business right now. So then you get people like Roberson and other people talking about this, maybe trying to affect some change.
Sure. Well, and great if it does.
And maybe they
and great if it does. Should. They give it. Sure. I guess. I don't know. I've not actually seen the contract to know.
Right.
I mean, I can understand from like both of these. The other thing about these two companies is they're not just a comic book company anymore. So, you know, when he comments in that one article about the fact that, you know, the TV rights to iZombie or, you know, kind of got mucked up and whatnot. Well, that's because DC is Warner, which they do TV. So of course, so you don't get yourself in a situation like poor Marvel with their X-Men. How those movies are all Fox, but they're Sony and everything else is Sony. That's got to be a wild nightmare. You know, as far as them, here's part of their successful part of their line of comic books that's the movies rights are owned by a rival company. So you know, they're protecting themselves, you know, from not having to deal with that kind of a, you know, that kind of a situation. The company has to exist. I mean, what if the company doesn't, you know, if the company doesn't exist, then we don't have any of this stuff. And is that what we want?
Well, and we also don't want to excuse company policy just so we get product, right?
Well, yeah. I don't think so. Well, I think it's probably a given. I think it's probably a given for most of us to say that, like, that the company, in general, the corporation can always treat their workers better than what they do.
Yeah, of course.
That's why there's unions and stuff.
Well, there you go. Maybe that's the route that the creator should take. I don't know. Well, like I said, this is a big. Like I said, I can't get my head around it completely, and I thought we would just come on and talk about this a little bit, but it's.
Well, I told you before we started that I could rant and rave for a long time about it, and I don't truly think that it's all that DC and the corporations and Marvel, that they're all right in everything that they do. That's certainly not what. And so hopefully when I listen back to this, I don't sound like that. That's what I'm saying, because it's not. But I don't think that it's a personal attack on Alan Moore. And I understand that he's not interested in this being the way it is. I understand that Chris Roberson doesn't like it either, and so therefore he quit, which is perfectly within his right. Good for him. You know, if he was doing all this to affect some sort of change, I hope that does, for all of their sake and whatnot. But it also, at the same time, it bothers me that, you know, when he quits and makes this a public outing about why he's quitting when the company has never done anything wrong to him. I don't know. I go both ways on it. For me to boycott these two companies, to me that seems insane. I can see personally, if you think that this whole Watchmen thing, for instance, is bad, don't buy the product. Obviously, if nobody buys those products, DC will learn very quickly that they screwed up on whether or not they thought they could pull us off, and they won't attempt to do it with something else, maybe. I don't know.
Absolutely. That's right.
There are times I don't like the internet, because there are times I really don't like knowing about the machine that goes on behind, because it takes the fun out of it. Somebody, I don't know who it was. I think it was like Cameron Stewart. Is that his name? Artist that does some work for everybody, I think. Worked on a bunch of the Batman Incorporated stuff, and he made the comment that he thought that it was that regardless of what happens from here on out, whether he reads any of these new books or not, which it didn't sound like he had really intention to, but that he won't even be able to go back and read Watchmen now without there being some, you know, taste in your mouth. And this isn't his words; these are my words of this whole spectacle that's gone on around it. But you know, the Watchmen isn't the first thing that Alan Moore has had fits over. Every movie that's been made of any of these stuff, he's had fits over.
That's true. Well, and in some ways for good reason. I mean,
sure.
Case in point, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Right.
Did you watch that movie?
Yeah.
I think that's all we need to say about it then.
Okay. Well, but you know, I mean, that's, he wanted his stuff to just be a comic book, and that's all it was, and there was nothing else, and nobody touches it, nobody does anything else with it. I understand. Obviously, he can do that from this point forward. Anything else he produces from whoever, he can make sure that he has something that states that. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. It just seems like after a while, it's like if somebody asks his opinion, he certainly has the right to go out. I wish they would have done it, and I don't want anything to do with it. Fine. They don't put his name on the credits. He has nothing to do with it. But it's not really his to take back. And that's unfortunate. But that's what it is.
But again, we come back to, yes, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not his. It's DC's. But is that right?
Sure it is.
Shouldn't DC have some deference to the creators from which they profited from their work?
No. I'm paying you to make something for me. Once you make something for me, it is mine. And in the contract it states if this never gets used again after X amount of time, you can have it back. But as long as it's being used, it's mine.
Is that right, though? Is that the right contract?
It would be like if you drew me a picture and I framed it and I hung it up and it's on my wall in my basement. You're fine with that. But then I decide I'm going to go hang it up at my place of work where everyone can see it, and you're not okay with that, and you tell me I can't do that with that product. But I own it because I bought it from you. Mm-hmm. But you're telling me where I can and can't hang it.
Well, but there's a difference here because we probably don't have a contract other than we've exchanged money for a good. We probably haven't signed something that said
that if the contract stated that I could only hang it in my basement, that would be fine. Yeah. These contracts don't state that to the best of our knowledge.
All right.
It says as long as it's in use, it's theirs.
Right.
Quit crying.
Okay. Well, I think we should move on because we are not going to. We're certainly
corporations all the way, man.
We're not here to solve these problems. We were just going to comment on. We're just commenting on them. So, I think that you and I think at least see things from both sides.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, I can perfectly understand Alan Moore's frustration, being pissed off, and not liking what's happening and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it sucks. And I can sympathize for that, but does that mean DC is wrong? I don't think they are.
Well, you're right. I think from a technical, a legal standpoint, they're certainly not wrong.
If you morally think DC is totally bankrupt and is, a spawn of a publisher, obviously quit buying the stuff.
Right.
Don't go to the movies. Don't, But if that's the case, man, there's a lot of stuff out there in the world you're going to have to boycott.
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
Realistically. So hopefully this whole thing ends up at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is that everybody gets better deals than what they've currently got. But they must not be totally awful deals. Otherwise, the people wouldn't be working there, I wouldn't think.
I don't know about that, but
everybody needs a job. But in this current market, I think so. I think there's enough. When the big name people are starting to understand how to make money, getting their stuff printed by Image or Dark Horse and whatnot, then they obviously don't need the big two. There's obviously some other desire to work for them. Just don't create anything for them.
Just work on Superman and Batman.
or whatever.
Right. But yeah, that stuff. Sure. I guess. All right, Travis, I think we should move on.
Okay.
From this. Let's go on to something a little bit more interesting and perhaps less controversial.
You can make it controversial.
All right, let's talk comics now. All right, so we're gonna talk about the 4 new Vertigo series that just came out recently. Fairest, Saucer Country, Dominique Laveau, Voodoo Child. I hope I pronounced that right. French stuff I can't do. And the new Deadwardians. So those are the 4 we're going to talk about. Let's talk about Fairest first, Travis.
Okay.
So this is by Bill Willingham At least this first arc is. Art by Phil Jimenez and inks by Andy Lanning. Colors by Andrew Dahlhaus. Todd Klein does the letters. Adam Hughes is doing the cover, at least the cover that I got.
Yep.
Beautiful cover. So this is a spin-off of Fables, of course. Bill Willingham is doing the first arc. They're going to bring in other writer-artist combinations to do other arcs in the future. Let's see here. So I was really looking forward to this, mostly because of Phil Jimenez's art, because I really love that guy's stuff.
Yeah, it is pretty.
And this issue certainly did not disappoint.
In the art?
In the art, yeah. And of course Andy Lanning has a part of this as well, doing the inks. But I love this. I love the way this looked.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's gorgeous as far as that goes, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to note. So, did you notice the paper?
What do you mean?
The type of paper for this comic, as compared to the others that we're going to talk about.
No, I guess I hadn't.
So the other ones are more of the more modern paper, which is the really slick stuff. But Fairest has more of a rough paper quality to it, and I'm really curious as to why they went that way, because they could have easily put this onto the slicker stock.
Sure, made all glossy. Mm-hmm.
And at first when I was, like I said, I open it up and the first thing I see is the beautiful Jimenez art, right? But then I notice as I'm flipping pages, that's when I notice the paper. And so I'm reading the comic and I get to the end and I'm thinking, oh, this is $2.99, but they probably went with the what I'm going to call cheaper paper. I don't know if it is, but I'm assuming that it probably is, because they wanted to give us more pages. Because when I read through this title, it felt like I was reading more than 20 pages of story. I don't know why, just that's just the feeling I had when I was reading it. So when I came back to it so that I could, I read through it again in preparation for today's talk, I actually counted the pages. Guess how many pages it is?
20.
20.
Yep.
So why in the hell did they go with this paper?
That's an interesting question.
And why am I making a big deal out of it? I don't know. It was just very interesting, these 4 new titles, this is the only one that has this. And maybe it has something to do with the art. Maybe the way that Jimenez and Lanning did the art, maybe that contributed to the type of paper. I don't know. I would like to find out, though.
That's an interesting question, because it never occurred to me.
What'd you think of the story, though?
That was okay.
Yeah, it was okay.
This is a book I hadn't intended to pick up. The reason I got it was because it was part of the deal. Because it's an offshoot of Fables, and I like Fables just fine, but I don't actually own it. I always borrowed other people's to read, and so wasn't necessarily interested in reading something else that was that. I got the impression from the ads going into this thing that it was going to be, it was going to be female centric. So I thought, well, maybe it might be interesting as far as that goes, because I don't think there's enough good female centric books out there. So
right.
I decided that I would definitely give it a shot to read it for that. And of course, this first issue isn't at all.
Yeah, there was some buzz online about that, about how it's supposed to be Fairest. You have all these wonderfully drawn by Adam Hughes ladies from the Fairest or the Fables world,
all the princesses.
Yeah, and yet you meet 2 of them at the very end.
Unconscious, yeah.
So, but you know what? I didn't think much of it, and maybe I'm just a typical guy, but I'm looking at this. This is the setup of the story.
Oh, sure.
And we're going to get more about these female characters as we go on. So I don't think we needed to have a female character on page 1, panel 1.
Right. Well, I wasn't necessarily meaning that. I was so surprised that wasn't what was it. That didn't take away from the story for me. Well, but for me, it just, I don't know. It just was.
Really? I enjoy this quite a lot.
The bottle imp is amusing, but I think after issue 2, I'll probably want to pull my hair out.
Well, that's probably true, but the initial introduction of the imp, I found refreshing. He's not your typical bottle genie type character. He's I guess it's a he. He's versed in things not of fairy tale, I guess.
Right.
There's this one bit in here where he talks about, and this is just me glomming onto this, but he talks about knowing or enjoying all 7 seasons of Firefly.
Yeah.
Even after they introduced the new captain, which sucked. Things like that. I enjoy that kind of play, I guess. But you're right. After a while, I mean, it could get annoying, I suppose. What do you think of the male character, Alibaba?
I don't know.
So this comic was really nondescript for you, huh?
I have had issue 2 sitting here on my desk in front of me. It's still sitting here right now. I have not read it.
Oh yeah.
And I've had it for, I don't know, at least 2 weeks.
Really?
Yeah. It just wasn't really. This is something that I might read in a trade, but to collect it monthly just doesn't really.
Yeah. Well, that's what
it doesn't interest me. So I'm just not. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I wanted to get this not necessarily because it's a spin-off of Fables. I like the idea of a female-centric title, which obviously we didn't get so much in this first issue, but I trust we'll get there. But I mostly was getting it for Jimenez's art.
Just really nice.
And as I said before, they're going to bring in other creative teams as we go through, and I like that idea. So you get new takes on the character by the writer and the artist involved. So I like that idea.
So who do you think's writing the second arc now?
That was supposed to be Roberson, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. They'll cobble something together, I'm sure.
Yeah, that'll add to the quality of the book, won't it?
Well, I'm sure that they're deft enough to address that.
Oh.
Okay. So you said that you only picked this up because it was part of that DCB service bundle.
Yep.
As I recall, DCB service isn't offering the bundle on this any longer.
Oh.
So you're not picking this up anymore.
No, I will not be.
All right. Well, I'll keep you apprised as to how good it might be. All right, let's move on then. Saucer Country, let's do that one.
Yeah.
I can tell you're already excited about this. Saucer Country is written by Paul Cornell, which is a huge part of why I bought it or wanted to buy it. Ryan Kelly's doing the art.
Yep.
Julia Brusco on colors, Sal Cipriano on letters. There you go. Saucer Country, what do you think?
Well, I was sold on this book before I even got the first issue, just because of the creative team that was on it.
Now, are you talking about Paul Cornell and Ryan Kelly, or just Paul Cornell?
No, Ryan Kelly. I'd buy it. It didn't matter who was writing it. I was going to buy it. An ongoing with Ryan Kelly, and I was going to go for that.
See, now it was the opposite for me. Not that I have anything against Ryan Kelly's work, but as soon as I knew that Paul Cornell was writing a book about politics and alien invasion, I was on board.
Well, that just sounds cool anyway. I mean, that alone makes it within what I want to read. The story description too.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I'm a big Ryan Kelly fan. I really liked his work. Been pretty much picking up whatever he's worked on since he did local with Brian Wood, Crony Press. I like his people. I like his females especially. I think he conveys emotions and feelings and thoughts and that sort of thing really well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether there's words on the page or not, I think he tells a really good story. So I'm excited to see him on a monthly for that. And I've enjoyed the stuff I've been reading of Paul Cornell. So and then they pitch it out there as being X-Files meets West Wing. I mean,
that's right. I was trying to remember the tagline for that. So that's perfect.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. You get a British writer like Paul Cornell doing a story about American politics. So I'm really curious. That's in part why I want to read this too, to see how well he portrays that. And I have to say, so far, and I have read issue 2.
Same here.
So
I like issue 2 better.
Yeah, issue 2 it does improve on the first one definitely. But he seems to be doing a really good job, and he seems to have a good grasp on it as well. So yeah, I really like this. And you say the Ryan Kelly art, I really enjoy it too. I think it fits the tone of this book really well so far. I'm not as well versed in his work as you are, but I did read Local, at least the stuff that you let me borrow, and I enjoyed that. So in fact, I think based on my dim recollection of Local, I think this is an improved Ryan Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
But that could be partially due to the. Well, no, I guess there's no inker. Ryan Kelly does all his own stuff here, so maybe that's part of it. But yeah, this is a good comic. I will definitely continue with this one as well, even if there was.
This is a comic. Yeah, this is a comic I intended to pick up anyway, and certainly plan on continuing regardless of the deal or not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. Anything else you want to say about Saucer Country?
Nope. Everybody should be picking it up though, unless you hate creepy gray-skinned aliens and weird little people talking to you on your shoulder. And...
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's gonna be
the
awesome.
Pioneer 10 couple.
Probing. If you got a problem with probing, maybe you don't want to.
Oh, that was good
Not
stuff.
Probing's my thing necessarily, but.
Yeah. No confessionals on this podcast, Travis.
Oh, okay, sorry.
All right. Let's go to the third title. Let's talk about Dominique Laveau. Is it Laveau or Laveau? I don't know.
Whatever. Voodoo Child.
Voodoo Child. Let's just go with that. All right. This is by where's the credits here? Selwyn Hines, Dennis Cowan, John Floyd, and I'm saying the names because I forgot to go to the credits page. So correct me if I'm wrong here. Oh, here we go. I love how DC puts some things at the beginning, some things at
right, and then hides it somewhere. Yeah.
Oh, in fact, yeah. Well, when we get to New Deadwardians, I'm going to comment about that too. Anyway, okay, so let's do this again. Selwyn Hines is the writer, Dennis Cowan's the penciler, John Floyd's the inker, Clem Robbins, letterer, Dave McCraig is the color artist. Okay. Out of the 4, when they announced these new 4, this was probably the last on my list of interest. I don't know about you, Travis.
I had no intention of getting it.
No intention.
I had no intention of getting it because I had read DC. Well, I don't know how many months ago now it's been. They put out a Vertigo put out a anthology book called damn it. Should did my homework. Can't remember. Unexpected.
I don't think it was called Damn It.
No. It's called Unexpected or
well, whatever it was a preview to promote these, right?
Yeah, it was the final story in that, and it was kind of a wet your whistle on what the story was going to be about. Yeah. And I knew then that I was not going to pick this book up.
Oh yeah. So what did you think of this first issue, having read the entire thing? Because I assume that Vertigo preview thing that didn't give you the entire issue, right? It just gave you a few.
No, it wasn't a preview. It was its own story. It wasn't
okay.
No part of it was in this book. No part of it was in this book. See.
All right, just an introduction.
It just gave you more background on, because the main character is related to some voodoo priestess that had been in New Orleans many, many years ago. And it gives you more of that background.
Oh, okay.
Up to who she's related to and whatnot. And it introduces you to this new modern version. In that, she at least seemed to have her wits about her in some sense. In this issue, I didn't think there was anything appealing about the main character.
Oh yeah.
She's just running, screaming like a victim through the whole thing, and at least I didn't get any sense that she was going to gain control of anything at any point. Mm-hmm. I mean, usually, if the main character starts out as seeming like a victim, before the first issue's done, you see them start to get a handle, in some sense, of their life or what's going on, right?
You really think that within a first issue introduction that the main character should have, I don't know, like as you said, some grasp on what's going on? Because she doesn't seem to get much opportunity to even think about what's going on. It's just she's being chased. She escapes. She goes and finds her aunt, and that's pretty much the end of the story.
But I guess I'm always used to them having some level of competence,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't feel like that at all. And to me, it just felt like, to me, there was nothing appealing about this lady.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't disagree with you, but
she's the she's the main character of a horror movie, but it doesn't feel like at any point she's going to get one over on the bad guy at the end.
Well, again, I'll play devil's advocate here. I think this is the first issue, and we would say that, or we would experience that as time goes on. They don't want to throw all their eggs in the one issue basket.
Well, I'm not saying because obviously she's not some magic wielding badass now, and I'm not expecting to have that at the end of the book. But I expect them to show me something that might imply that she's not going to be roadkill if she's the main character. Well, the only reason I know she's not going to be roadkill is she's the main character.
She survived the first issues. I mean, come on, she's not roadkill based on that alone.
Crap. Okay, whatever.
Okay, so besides the lack of appealing main character,
gee, that's not a problem.
Yeah. My problem with this, and I don't, like I said, I don't disagree with you. I have problems with the character. She runs around like the stereotypical female victim in a horror movie type character, but it's so, her dialogue. See, this is where it gets, because I don't mind the art. I think the art, the Cowan art, fits the tone of this book, of this story. Mm-hmm. But I have to say, Selwyn Hines' writing, a little too much soap opera-y, a little too purple prosy. Yeah. It just, I didn't like it. I didn't like the dialogue. When you get to the scenes with the one guy, the Chancellor, he's talking to him. I don't know. It's very soap opera-y. I'll come back to that, but it just seems like a bad New Orleans-based horror movie.
Yeah.
I hate to say that, but it's just, I was not, I did not, see, I didn't read the Vertigo thing that you talked about earlier. I didn't read that. So my first introduction to this was this issue. And I read this one, and I knew by the end of it, this was not a comic. Other than, if I continue to get that if DCB Service had continued to give us that huge discount that they were giving us, sure, I'd still get these just so I could get the other three.
Yeah, and just so people know that discount was, we basically bought 4 books for the price of 1.
Exactly, right. Yeah. But if not for that, I wouldn't have gotten this in the first place, and I certainly wouldn't continue with it if they didn't continue to provide that discount, which they have not. So it's gone. But reading this, this was not good. Yeah. I mean, I feel bad. I always feel bad whenever I decide on the first issue of a comic that I should be done with it, because to me it's kind of like it's like TV series, right? They do a pilot. Mm-hmm. Usually that's the first episode that gets aired. But they do a pilot, and oftentimes they'll retool the show after the pilot's been done. Mm-hmm. And so you really can't, in my mind, judge a new TV show based on that first episode, because they've come back and they've retooled it. Maybe they've recast it. And then the second episode and on, that's really when you should give it a few episodes to really decide if this is a show for you. So I kind of feel the same way about comics as I do about new TV shows. But,
did anything about this book pique your interest?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, I've seen these tropes before.
Yeah. And the only thing that might happen for me is the guy at the very, very end, the very last page.
Oh, see, I have that's what really sold it on me, is like, well, this is dumb.
Well, I just like the image of the guy.
Well, okay, yeah. I'm like, yeah, again, the art, I think the art's great. I mean,
yeah. But yeah.
It really fits.
But I mean, I guess for me, I will read the second issue to because obviously I'm getting it. I'll read it to see if anything's improved or anything, or changed or whatever, but I don't expect it to. So
did we get we obviously got that discount on the first 2 issues. Did they do the discount on the third?
I
can't remember if
do
it was
not remember.
Third or fourth pre-orders that the DCB service dropped that. So anyway, I won't be continuing with it.
Nope.
All right. Let's move on now. Final issue of our look at the new Vertigo 4, the new Deadwardians. And so when I was looking for the credits box in Voodoo Child, there's no credit box for new Deadwardians. It just has Dan Abnett as the writer and I.N.J. Culberd as the artist cover, and that's it. I looked through this thing, and I swear to God, if you find this and
I don't have the issue in front of me.
Okay. So. Well, I'm looking through it now as I'm talking, but I've looked through this thing like 3 or 4 times. There is no credit box that I can find, which don't you think that's weird? Did someone just, did the editor go, or did the editor not do their job and make sure that was in there? Because that's one of the things about comics, that nowadays they put the creators in there. Who did the writing, who did the penciling, who did the inking, who did the colors.
Why can't they change that and not put all that stuff in?
Well, you're right, they could, but I'd like to know who's working on these comics. I like to give them credit for the work that they do, right? Did Culberd do the penciling, the inking, the coloring, the lettering? I somehow doubt that, but
I imagine, yeah.
Yeah, that's really weird. But anyway, enough about the credits. New Deadwardians. And this one, unlike the other 3 titles we've talked about, this one is actually a limited series. This is the first of 8.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I can see why they did that. I could also see that this could be an ongoing series if they wanted it to. But for whatever reason, they decided, they're going to tell a story in 8 issues, and that's fine with me. I like short form comics as well as long form. I really enjoyed this. What about you?
I did too. This is one that I was curious about, and I was going to pick up at least the first issue, regardless of, the deal, just because it sounded curious, and I really got a real kick out of it actually reading it though. Mm-hmm. The idea to survive a zombie apocalypse is to get turned into a vampire that, and then the way the book ends, the book ending with another mystery,
right?
It's cool. It appeals to me, the idea of being a homicide detective where no one dies.
Right.
That's all that kind of stuff is all kind of really interesting little things and whatnot. So.
Yeah, actually, this title, much like Voodoo Child, when I saw the premise that it was, the zombies were involved, that was an instant turn for me. So I actually wasn't gonna pick this one up either, except for the fact, I did start to rethink that because it's only 8 issues, Dan Abnett's writing it, it's set, it's a period piece, and I like those, but oh man, zombies! I'm so sick of zombies.
Yep. I
love The Walking Dead. I love that comic. But all the other zombie stuff that we've been getting these last few years, I'm so sick of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have to say, I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed this title. I like the main character. I like the premise. I want to know more about this world. Why are there zombies in the Edwardian age? Why is he a vampire? What's this cure thing they talk about? What happened to him that he's in this position? Why is he a homicide detective? Why is he the only one around still? What's the deal with that?
Right.
Because there's that scene where he goes to work and there's all these chairs and desks and stuff, and they're all covered up because no one's working.
Yep.
So
there's a lot of questions that will be interesting to see how many of them they actually answer for us as we go through this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in 8 issues. Well, now 7.
How much of it's just going to be setting and not provide us answers, and how much of it,
Oh, I bet we get the answers. But to what degree we get them is probably the question to ask.
Right.
How much detail are we going to get? But I bet we get all that stuff in 8 issues. I think Dan Abnett has a pretty good reputation as far as telling a good story. So I expect we'll get the same out of this. So, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of this story.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
All right, that is our look at the new Vertigo 4. Anything else that we want to talk about, Travis, before we head on out?
Oh, I probably talked more than enough.
Well, it was a good conversation regardless. All right, we will be back to talk about some other aspect of comics very soon, I'm sure. Please visit the blog at longboxreview.wordpress.com. You can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com, where I'm also on Twitter. You can talk to me there as well. That's where I usually go first to check to see what's happening in comics and if there's a conversation that anybody wants to engage me in. You can visit Travis's blog at oddfellowsthoughts.wordpress.com.
Yep.
And where you can watch his video reviews about comics with his son, which are always amusing and educational.
Educational. I do a good job of editing, so you don't see me strangling him too often.
So you should just do an outtake video, right? Of all those.
There you go.
You'd be like you and you're Homer and he's Bart. Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably don't want to show that actually in public.
No.
He was joking. No. He was joking, of course, right, Travis?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No child abuse.
Yeah, that's right. No child abuse. All right, I guess that's it. Thank you, Travis. It's a great discussion as always.
Sure thing.
And we will talk with you soon. Thanks for listening.